Hi, good evening, everyone. How are you? So nice to see everybody here this evening. Yeah, it is Tuesday, August 18th. I'm back. Yeah, I had a nice long weekend, and I hope that you did too. Looking forward to talking with everybody. It's those dog days of summer. We're in New York City, great place to be always. Um, one of my favorite schools of painting, and I've shown this before and talk about it a lot, but I just wanted to look at it in terms of the season, is the Ashcan School, the central, the kind of village, right? Greenwich Village. Um, and From early 19th, early 20th century. And I thought it'd be fun to look at let's look at it in terms of the season, because we're all kind of desperate to get outside and to be a part of the city. And the city is opening up a tremendous amount. It's been really wonderful, I have to say. I've really enjoyed it. The weather has been really nice. Spend a lot of time in Central Park these days. I'm teaching there, which is always great. There's a lot of outdoor exhibits and things. And so let's take a look at what the city looked like during the Ashcan School. I'm going to read you a little bit about it because it's one of my favorite time periods. So let's see. And let's see who we have with us this evening. Uh, Hey, Clyde, how are you? So nice to see you here. Thank you for joining. Yeah, so we have, who do we have? William Glackens. Yeah, Washington Square. And this is at the Boston Museum of Fine Arts. It's a great painting. It's really, I love the treatment to the trees. And then you see the Washington Square arch there. And so this is around 1912. It's a really wonderful time in our history of New York. Well, I love New York history in general. Um, but we're in full-fledged industrial revolution here. You have the deforestation of New York begins very early on, almost the minute that Henry Hudson sails through. But you see a little bit of the beauty of the park, but you also see the Washington Square Arch. At this time is a really large arch, right? Not so much now compared to the rest of the city, but really has that sense of the Arc de Triomphe in Paris. So the Ashcan School was an artistic movement in the United States during the late 19th and early 20th century, and it's best known for portraying scenes of daily life in New York, often in the city's poorer neighborhoods. And I think that's what's so fascinating about it, because when you see the daily life portrayed, yes, there's a sense of crowding and poverty that you'll see, but there's the sense of community and shared experience is tremendous. And really, that is what New York is about. The best known artists working in that style are Robert Henry, George Lukes, William Glackens, John Sloan, Everett Shinn. Um, I don't have all of them here. The Ashcan School was not an organized movement. The artists who worked in this style did not issue manifestos or even see themselves as a united group with identical intentions or career goals. Some were politically minded, and others were apolitical. Their unity consisted of a desire to tell certain truths about the city and modern life that they felt had been ignored by the suffocating influence of the genteel um, genteel tradition in the visual arts, which is really interesting because in doing that, they usher in a very modern feeling, right? And it's true, you can't really depict a scene like this if you're working from the lens and the perspective of gentility and possibly a drawing room. Yeah. And so here, Bellows gives us a really phenomenal painting, Cliff Dwellers. And it's really important because it also becomes a way in of looking at history. We get to see history from these paintings. We get to see how people lived, how we were. Um, oh, good, Clyde. I'm so glad to hear that. That's excellent. I see that I have other people watching and I don't see your comments. So please, everybody, let me see who you are. Yeah, love to see everybody that's here and hear from you. Everybody gets to talk about what they see, because that's really the most important thing for me in working with art, is to ask the question, what do you see? And oftentimes with students, well, all the time with students, my follow-up question is, what makes you say that? For example, someone may say, I see a lot of people in white. Okay. Or where do you see that, or what makes you say that? And I want them to be very specific. It's in that deciphering of the work that brings us closer to the work, brings us closer to the artist, brings us closer to ourselves, because our observations are very important. And especially in work like this, it's really important that we see the city for what it was at the time, not just what was recorded in the history books, but what the artists saw. And here we see this incredible community, right, on the Lower East Side. I think it's interesting they call them cliff dwellers, because it is a little bit, I look at that title as the cliffs being the apartment buildings, right, the crowdedness of those apartments. I love the laundry hanging outside above it all, just like this emblem, this standard bearer or flag of this human interaction in New York City. Yeah, who else do we have? Charles, how are you? Hi, Mom. So good to see you here. Yeah, it's the historical aspects, Clyde, are so important here. They are really important. And I would love for all of these paintings to be in history museums, although they can't be. What's really nice, though, is to have paintings like this to really look at life, our daily life in New York City. And it's still a subject that gains so much attention. What is life like in New York City? There's always this kind of romanticism about it. People want to know what it's like to live in the city. Certainly now we're hearing a lot, because of COVID, of people moving out of the city and the homeless situation and the crime. And yet there's the stories that you hear, and then there's the life that we live. And I feel that these artists were able to capture them. And we have an exhibit right now at the New York Historical Society that's exhibiting the life that we're all living through photographs in New York City right now during this time. So it's really very, very important. So George looks here, Houston Street. Love this piece, because you see it as this bustling, exciting neighborhood of open air markets, farm markets, and farm to table had a different meaning back then. The buildings, the awnings, the people. It's colorful, it's interactive. There's really tremendous community, and that's always been about New York. Yeah, Charles, the modern version of that, right? What does it look like today? And I can tell you that there are areas of the city that still look like this today. There's no question. Great areas of the city. And I travel all over the city. I love going all over this. There is this thing, you guys, about New Yorkers, I have to tell you, it's true. You kind of get into a neighborhood and you settle there, and people don't want to go like 10 blocks outside their neighborhood, which is half a mile. I am, and I've always made it my point to go everywhere, to go to all the different neighborhoods and all the different places. And each neighborhood has its feel and its tremendous sense of community that is unique to itself. It's so beautiful. Then in this piece, which I also love, Maurice Prendergast shows us that more upper crust New York City. That more genteel part of the city. And so he's not so much a part of the Ashcan School, because the Ashcan School is looking for something real. This is real, no question. It's just a different story. And it almost reminds me a little bit of the Renaissance moving into mannerism and Baroque art, where the Renaissance, you have these icons, right? You have religious icons and this notion of the beauty of those icons, and of course, all of the religious and philosophical aspects. And then later, the late Renaissance Baroque, where you're looking more at these images through a more human lens. And then, of course, opening it up completely, well, even before in the Dutch period of Frans Hals, of going right inside a pub. What is the pub life, right, in the Netherlands and such a Renaissance in the North? So it's kind of like going from the aristocracy to more of real life closer to the street, as it were. I think that's what I want to say. Common subjects were street urchins, prostitutes. The work of Ashcan painters links them to the documentary photographs of Jacob Riis. So true. Jacob Riis becomes very, very important to history. Without Jacob Riis, there is so much that we would not know, or we would see it differently, because Jacob Riis was one of the first to go into the so-called tenements and such and photograph the way the newly arrived immigrants were living. Is that Arlene? Hi. Oh, Arlene. Yeah, when you change your password, it's a tough one, right? Yeah, that's true, Charles. You can imagine all the sounds and smells. That's exactly right. And so when you talk about a place like Little Italy, where Houston Street is not far from, I mean, the smell of Little Italy, that sense that, and it's interesting where stereotypes come from, right? That sense that the garlic, right, that Italians use to cook, oil, right, the kind of that sense of greasiness. The smells of Chinatown are different from Little Italy. The city becomes this vibrant life, and the Ashcan School depicts it beautifully, really depicts it beautifully, and I really just love these paintings, and I still feel very connected to them. I still feel like I'm still living in that city. Some things have changed, but we're still here. We're just building upon the generations. I think it was in Leaves of Grass. Walt Whitman, there's a beautiful passage in Leaves of Grass, and he talks about being in Brooklyn, and he's talking about the people that came before him, the Native Americans. I think it came from his passage called Mannahatta, and he said, as he's walking in Brooklyn, I'm walking the same places you are. I'm walking the same streets you are. I'm so connected, and that's what these paintings do for us as New Yorkers, as people, right? You feel so connected to prior or to ancestors and to the way, specifically for New Yorkers, the way New Yorkers have always lived, even though it may feel so different for the rest of the country and the rest of the world. I think the colors, Charles, it's a good question. I have to say, I'm always very nervous about doing programs because the color, I'm getting these pieces off of the internet. I try to get them as close to the colors as I know the colors to be, but it's a very tricky thing. It's very, very tricky depending, this came, I believe this piece, the Bellows piece came from a link from the museum. And so I think it's pretty close to its colors. Yeah, but it's always an issue. It's always an issue in the pieces. And the hardest for me is picking Van Goghs because the internet is wild with so many pieces you don't even think are reproductions of real pieces and posters and this. And the colors vary tremendously. And it's really important with artists to get the colors right. So when I was in my undergrad program, honestly, a lot of times we worked from black and white slides. Our professor preferred to work in black and white slides. She felt it was a much better way of looking at the work because you couldn't always get great color reproductions. And then when I worked for a very short period of time as an internship at Sotheby's, we also worked from black and white. Yeah. So anyway, so that's our look at the summer in the city. It feels the same way. Yeah, don't you love the light and dark of Bellows? I do too, Arlene. It's really something. It's really something. And all these people are out there and they have a strong community. I mean, I understand that people can see them as they're crowded. They are. The conditions can sometimes be unsafe. That's true. They are living on top of each other. That's right. That's what we see. We see that. Kids are in the street. Yeah. There's a trolley car going through. But what we also see is this incredible sense of community. So if this is Little Italy or wherever people are coming in from, Irish neighborhood, whatever neighborhood people are coming in from, they gather and they form these very strong communities based on their cultural identities. And then that then becomes the fabric of New York that we all get to be a part of, which is really phenomenal. Yeah. So everyone, we are in almost the last week and a half of August, and it's supposedly things are starting to open up. Museums are going to open on the 24th, I heard, or the 26th, so that'll be really nice. Yeah. I think we're going to get back to life a little bit. It'll be changed, but New York will still be, Charles, to your point, and I'm going to try to get some images from the Historical Society as we look at how we've all lived these past few months. New York is ever evolving. We're getting a lot of information right now. I'm constantly reading articles of people moving out of New York and people fed up with New York and I can't be here anymore and I have to leave because of COVID and I have to find green space. And then the articles will always say New York is never going to survive it. And we're not going to survive. This city has survived so much. Between 1885, I think, and I don't have the exact numbers, millions of people poured into this city, immigrants poured into this city to be here, to help build it, to be part of a fabric of it, to realize the American dream. This city has gone through so many iterations, and yet it continues to bounce back. And so it will once again. I don't even see it as going away. I just see it as part of the life of it. Like we're a part of this whole long life, right? Where we are now is just part of the Ashcan School, a continuum. So I'll try to find some images over from that exhibit. Yeah. Hey, Leslie, how are you? Good to see you here. Yeah. Great to see you. Yeah. Yeah. Everybody used coal. That's the truth. And that was both dangerous and messy. Yeah, and everybody had horses. And that was dangerous. People got trampled and it was messy, right? It was, yeah. The Bellows is beautiful, isn't it? I love it too. I love it too. I love the way he shines the light, right, on the women in the center with the white clothes. It's almost, they're with the kids and they're playing, and even in this neighborhood that is overcrowded, all kinds of issues, there is truly a sense of community. I did read somewhere, I want to see if that's true about this, that this might have been let me just see. Maybe not. But, this, yeah, New Yorkers are, we love our neighborhoods. So the Cliff Dwellers, let me read you a little bit about this. It depicts a colorful crowd on New York City's Lower East Side on what appears to be a hot summer day. Yeah, the painting is a representative example of the Ashcan school. In cliff dwellers, people spill out of tenement buildings onto the streets, stoops, and fire escapes. Laundry flaps overhead, and a street vendor hawks his goods from a pushcart in the midst of the traffic. In the background, a trolley car heads towards Vesey Street. Yeah, the work was painted using a color system promoted by Hardesty Gilmore Maratta, a paint manufacturer and color theorist. Maratta marketed oil paints in a range of colors produced by mixing primary colors in precise ratios. Each color was given the value of a particular musical note, and artists were advised to use the colors in ways that would produce harmonious intervals and chords. Bellows had begun using the system sometime in 1909 and 1910, and according to art historian Michael Quick, he says Cliff Dwellers was his most complex exploration of the Marietta color system. It contained 3 chords: orange, red, purple, green, blue, blue, purple, green, red, orange, yellow, green, red, and blue. That sounds more like 3. Okay, yeah. But Bellows used the colors of each individual chord together in separate areas of the painting. The first chord in the foreground, the second primarily in the background, and the third in the red brick buildings to the left and right. The painting, it was made in 1913, suggests the new face of New York. Between 1870 and 1915, the city's population grew from 1.5 to 5 million. That is huge. We tracked that population at the Historical Society. We went from 1.5 to 5 million people. So think about the stress of the city. Think about how the deforestation can happen so quickly and without any kind of thought to make room for housing. Many of the new arrivals, Italian, Jewish, Irish, and Chinese, crowded into tenement houses on the Lower East Side, the area north of the Brooklyn Bridge, south of Houston Street, and east of the Bowery. Among them were thousands of Eastern European Jews who found temporary or permanent shelter along streets such as East Broadway, the setting for Cliff Dwellers. The city had never seen this kind of density before. Within the context of Cliff Dwellers, the audience is able to convey a sense of congestion, overpopulation, primarily seen in the foreground, and the impact of the city among the youth. Within the book, The Paintings of George Bellow, a historical account of how adamant urban reformers were during the early 20th century as thousands of immigrants migrated to neighborhoods of New York. The children of Bellow's Cliff Dwellers, innocent as they appeared, exhibited no effects of the requisite Americanizing process urban reformers considered crucial to the maintenance of social order. It's interesting, this notion of Americanizing. There's the notion of Americanizing and what's necessary for law and order, and then there's what's happening in the neighborhoods. You still have people in Chinatown today who are only speaking Chinese. You had Yiddish spoken in the Jewish neighborhoods. You had Italian spoken in the Italian neighborhoods, and that stayed for a long time. And the city, it works. We love it. Yes, some of these buildings are still standing today, no question. We love it. It's the flavor of a neighborhood. Yeah. So paired with the scrutiny heaped upon immigrants was the fact that they were made to live in conditions which were unbearable by the toll of industrialization in these small areas. Yeah, that's what I was saying. Clyde, I see Naples from the corner of my eye, and you're absolutely right. Yeah, that the deforestation happens, this phenomenal amount of industrialization occurs, right? The advent of steel, and then it brings in trolley cars, the elevated trains. So you're just knocking down green spaces. And that takes a toll on the human being. And then you're living on top of each other. It's tough, but it also has created what we're living with today as well. Small and dense were the living quarters of many who worked in similar environments and factories. Small, dense, dark, which can easily be seen within the painting and helps promote the idea of how industrialization has impacted the working class lifestyle. New York realists were called by critics as the revolutionary black gang and the apostles of ugliness. I don't see, and I don't see the ugly here. I know very well the issues with industrialization. I know very well the issues with lack of labor laws and the use of children and the sweatshops and all of that. But it's interesting that this painting is considered ugly. It goes to show you that kind of genteel taste of the day. A critic, referring to their depictions, also conferred them the pejorative label Ashcan School, which became the standard term for this first important movement of art in the 20th century. So ash can, like garbage can, or the ash can. I like it. They call themselves the Eight. But yeah, very exciting, very exciting, very exciting city. But yeah, had lots of problems. And many of the neighborhoods are like that today. That's exactly right. And we're seeing that in this. We're seeing that certainly as historians now are looking at New York and the history of New York and the building of New York, going from Manhattan to Manhattan and such, New York, the whole state. There's this understanding coming from more of a green place that the deforestation, the industrialization has to be planned. It has to be done in a way in which you're not just removing all your green spaces, that the two can somehow, there's a better balance, right? So, yeah. So, no, I can't imagine a summer without, yes, I can imagine a summer without air conditioning. Charles, I lived in Italy. Yeah, you get used to it. No ice either. You get used to it. And then what happens is air conditioning starts to feel like you're better off without it. You're just better off without it because you go into a place and you're freezing cold. So it's interesting. But yeah, it's not easy. I've heard the term ashcan, but never really, yeah. Oh, you're welcome. It does look like a piazza. I agree with you. In Italy, it does. We still have them. I love it that it just, everybody, we go to, Jean and I go on Sundays to the Green Market right near the Museum of Natural History. And it looks just like this. We bring our own bags and we go and shop. It's great. Yeah. All right, everybody. So good to see you all tonight. I'll be back tomorrow. Yeah. Yeah. Hope everybody's doing well. I feel like we're turning a corner. I do. I feel like the numbers are going down in terms of COVID, hoping that there won't be a resurgence. Everybody just keep wearing a mask, right? So I'll see everybody tomorrow evening, and thank you for joining me. Have a great night, everybody. Bye-bye.